Erick here, and welcome back to my Chess Novice to Master series. As you can tell, there's already some major changes, and I'm only my second game in. First of all, I am not going to be commentating while playing a game live, and then later doing a separate video analyzing that very same game. Instead, I'm still going to be playing on the live server on chess.com, but I will be recording and analyzing the game after that. Also, as you can tell, again by the design, I am using a different program, and it's going to produce way better videos, as you'll see when I get into the game I played and the game I'm going to analyze and talk about in my Novice to Master series today. So the game I played today is from a tournament, an independent tournament on a group on chess.com. The name of the group is the Dan Heisman Learning Center, and Dan Heisman is a national master who does Q&A sessions for chess.com/TV, or Chess TV for short. And he does the Q&A sessions on Fridays, and he also has a group where thousands of people come to play games, share ideas, and things like that. And I'm doing a Swiss-style quad tournament, meaning there's 4 people in my group that are rated under 1,000, and we play each other twice, not consecutively. So the games are 45 minutes with a 45-second increment per move, and I will play 6 games like that, and this is the first one. So let's get started. All right. He opens up with knight to f3. To me, for someone of a weaker rating, or weaker rating, not that they're weaker than me, but in my category as being a novice or being someone who's new, generally when I see this, I see what's going to be the King's Indian attack. And what signifies the King's Indian attack is not this move knight to f3, but the pawn to g3, the bishop taking its spot, and the castling on the king's side. What signifies the King's Indian attack is that fianchetto of the bishop, pawn push, and then the bishop taking its spot. So one thing I've been trying to work on is establishing a solid defense against certain openings, and this one I just happened to try out the Caro-Kann, which I've tried to been doing months back, but now I am doing it again more frequently just so I can see how it plays out each time in different settings. So this signifies the Caro-Kann, this c6 move. I'm obviously trying to go for a d5, controlling this e4 square. My opponent plays e4. I'm like, perfect. So now I can play d4 or d5. I decide not to take right away. I push. I'm afraid if I don't push, I'm going to have a little bit of exchange, and for whatever reason, I don't want that. And it is dangerous having 3 pawn moves within the first 5 to 10 moves without developing any pieces in the center here. Because if you look at chess.com, the first 3 principles out of the 10 principles for beginners is develop, develop, develop. My opponent has 2 pawns in the center and a minor piece. I have 2 pawns, one that I already moved twice. Another principle is never move a piece twice in the opening. Now I didn't even move a piece twice. I moved a pawn twice, weaker than a minor piece. So we're going to keep continuing. But in the Caro-Kann, you're already expected to make a lot of pawn moves with that c3 to d5, or excuse me, c6 to d5 pawn moves, because they're already expected two pawn moves there. So they go ahead. I was right. This is signifying that they do want to put their bishop on g2 and then castle kingside, fianchettoing their bishop, going for the King's Indian attack. Now I make another pawn move. That's 4 pawn moves within the first 5 moves. But with this one, it has a purpose of me. I'm definitely going to develop the next move, because with this pawn to e6, I give my bishop some scope here to develop to e2, d3, and any of these squares on this file. So they go ahead and continue with their King's Indian attack. I throw a check in here. Now, if I were my opponent, I consider 3 options. And they took a little bit, maybe 2.5 minutes on this move. Remember, it's a 45-minute game. per side. They could put their knight on d2. They could put their knight on c3, but that probably wouldn't be recommended since I already have this pawn push, or excuse me, this pawn on d4, which is protecting that square alongside my bishop. So they could also put their knight on d2, or they could push their pawn to c3, and that's probably what I would do. Comment below and tell me what kind of moves you would do in this situation and why. So instead they make what I believe is the weaker move. They decide to block and pin their piece to their king by putting their bishop on d2. And what this does, it also threatens my bishop. I either have to move, or I'm going to have to take it, or I'm going to have to defend it. What I choose, I defend it with my queen. They decide to castle, unpinning their piece. So I go ahead and get rid of the bishop, and they can capture either with their knight, either knight, or their queen. They capture with their queen. Again, I would either have to defend it or move it. And if I'm going to retreat a piece, I'm not going to retreat it for the sake of retreating. I see here, if I look at the whole position, I take some time, look at the entire board. I have a pawn hanging. The pawn that I pushed forward is now hanging since my queen was defending and now it's moved. Now that I don't want the queen trade and I'm going to have to move it, I'm going to go ahead and defend my pawn. They continue their development to their only safe square for their knight. With this, I obviously have intentions of castling kingside. With so much open space on my queen side, I wouldn't want to castle that way. So with this move, and here's a weakness of mine that if you play me, you probably don't want to forget. I am very scared of queen and knight combos. So with this thing, with this pawn to h6, I'm not just throwing a pawn out there, but I'm stopping the knight from coming to g5, and stopping the queen from having too much activity over here in this lower quadrant. The knight could still go to h4, but it doesn't seem like it's a strong square, not to me. If you're a stronger player than I, and it is a good square for it, comment below and tell me why. Instead, they continue their, instead of moving those two pieces that I was concerned about, they put their rook on a central file, which I guess is an okay move. It helps develop their piece. Now with this move, I know, because before I decided to put my knight to d7, I have a few pawns and I have one piece, which is my queen, which is very dangerous to have out in the open like this without having it being kicked around, which in this situation I don't think it really can be. But they have their queen developed, they have their bishop, which is blocked in but it's still developed, they have two knights, and they have two pawns, one being in the center, one just outside the center. So I'm like, okay, I have to develop a piece. With this, it obviously shows that the focal point is now e5. I have my queen eyeing on e5, and I have my knight eyeing on e5. I could also have my pawn to f6, also eyeing the e5 square and helping me defend it, and a couple other things. So I wonder if my opponent notices. They take a little bit for this move, and they put another piece to defend on e5. Now I could do pawn to f6, but if they decide to push their pawn to that square and put it directly on it, it is not good for me, because after all these exchanges, they'll have their rook on the open file, or this pawn will be very weak if I push this pawn forward, and all the exchanges ensue. So if they push their pawn forward, I push my pawn forward, I push my pawn forward, they push their pawn forward, I take with the pawn, they take with their knight, I take with my knight, and then they take with their knight, their other knight. I would not be able to recapture my queen because that rook is taking control of that file, and I would have to defend this pawn, which it would be developed or protected by this bishop, but it would still be a very iffy situation for me. So instead, I put my pawn on that square, because if we go through the whole series of exchanges, I will win the exchange. They capture with their knight, I capture with my knight, They capture with their other knight, and I take with my queen. That would be me winning 2 knights, 2 minor pieces for a pawn and a minor piece. And a minor piece, knight or bishop, is stronger than a pawn, so that would be me being what's called up the exchange. Instead, they move to a3 with the obvious intention of going to b4, kicking my queen out of the square. Now, I'm going to want to put my queen on a square where it's still pretty active. I could put it over to the E to H quadrant over here, but I don't really feel like it, so I anticipate this move, don't move my queen right away, and give it a little slot to come back to here. They push, obviously. That was the intention. So I go back here. I don't want to have this fork with the knight coming to b6 to fork my bishop and my rook, which is one reason why I put my queen here. Even though I had my knight defending, if they chose not to do that, I would still need to get a piece to defend my pawn on the e file, so I decide to keep my knight there and move my queen back. Check, forking my king and my bishop. I have to move my king, which is stopping me from castling, which in this situation isn't terrible, but I had every intent on castling, but it wouldn't be a deal breaker if I couldn't. Now this is getting a little dangerous. They're putting pressure on my knight. Their knight is attacking my bishop. It's just a fiesta over here, big war zone, Genghis Khan style. I move my knight, protecting to G6 or F6, protecting my other knight. They take my pawn, which is a bad move because they're just trading down a pawn for a knight. Now they trade off their minor piece. Now here, they're attacking my queen, so I have to either move my queen or get rid of the knight. Now, most people would be afraid to capture with their rook to get rid of the knight, but that's exactly what I do. And I'm hoping that they use their bishop to capture my rook. Reason being, there is a trick I have up my sleeve, and if you're a novice player like myself, you may pause the video and see if you see the trick. So, okay, we're back. You paused the video. I have my fingers crossed. I'm hoping they take my rook with their minor piece. Crazy, right? But they decide to. And I have, there we go, this check, which forks their rook and their queen. And because it's a knight and it's not being under attack while checking the king, they can't take it, so they have to move their king, or they can't block it with anything because it's a knight. So they move their king, and I freely win the queen. One thing I do is I tend to underestimate my opponents sometimes when their rating is just as low as mine. And when I see some of these tactics available, or some of these tricks that are available 2 or 3 moves down the road, I sometimes expect that they won't see them. And it's fun to play into them just to see if they will or they won't. Just make sure you have a backup plan. I don't think I really had one here, but I was in a decent enough position. And now, taking the risk, seeing that my opponent just saw a free rook, they saw that they would be up the exchange, but they didn't see this awesome fork that I had here. And that totally changes the game. And I think this is the point where my opponent loses. They resign a few moves later. I'll just kind of go through them. So they advance their pawn, hoping it'll be a queen one day. And they attack my knight, so I move my knight. Push their pawn again. I could take with my pawn, but they have their rook on this file and they have their bishop on that square, which would be very terrible for me. Their rook would end up on the 7th rank and attacking not attacking anything, but they'd have their rook close to the 7th rank, which would put my king in some serious danger. My queen is pretty much out of play at this point, and my rook is out of play as well. So instead, I block it from going forward anymore just to see what my opponent has in store. They push their bishop and kind of just wait. So I kind of hurry my queen, and I'm hoping that they take with their pawn. because if they take my pawn and put their pawn on the 7th, I can take with my king, and I'd still have my knight protected because it's on a dark square. It can't be attacked by the bishop, but it will be in the sights of the rook. And I want to keep my king as close as possible, or any piece as close as possible, just to kind of make sure I keep everything in line and kind of keep the advantage that I have. You never want to leave a piece hanging if you can prevent it. So they do take. Now, my intention here is to check and once again have another fork and win this pawn, which is so close to making a queen and making things rough for me in this game. So they see that, and they decide to stop my queen from being able to go to that square. I can't take the bishop because, again, it's being defended by the rook. I push my pawn, giving my queen a square for a check, and also threatening to put my queen on f3, which is very scary with my knight here. But they decide to attack my knight, and I could either move my knight right away, or I could throw a check in between or something, just to kind of. It's called an in-between move. It starts with a Z, and I have no idea how to pronounce it. If you know how to pronounce it, put it in the comments below, and I'll thank you very much, and I appreciate your help. So I do check and give that in-between move. They move their king. I move my knight, which attacks their rook. So they would have to move their rook or bite the bullet and lose another piece. So they obviously want to move their rook. But that leaves me with another tactical opportunity. See if you notice it. Pause the video. Alright, if you guessed fork, you're absolutely right. This bishop is very dangerous, so I was so happy I was able to get this move in. Check the king, and again, it's the knight, it's not being under attack, and the check can't be blocked, so they have to move their king. And I win the bishop. They could capture with their rook, but they wouldn't really want to, because my queen's there defending it, and that's not good for them. So they decide to push their pawn. I take that pawn to eliminate all threats of not being able to move my king and possibly getting into a dangerous situation somehow, some way. They move their king down here to h5, which I think is a very bad square. The only two squares it has available right now, or because of that move, are h4 and g4, where it could go back to h3, which I think would have been a better square, because they didn't notice this. Yep, yet another tactic, winning a rook. They move, I win the rook. And here's where they resign, because I could continue, I could put my knight onto g6, checking the king, forcing it back, and doing all sorts of crazy stuff. But this is it. The game's over. I appreciate it if you would comment talking about some of the things that I did well and some of the things I did not so well, some of the things I missed, some of the things I probably explained incorrectly. I'm sure there was many of them. Answers to my questions and some of the things that I asked, like that Z word that I still can't pronounce. And just make sure you stay tuned and check out other videos. Make sure you, again, comment below and subscribe and follow me on Twitter at AFWF_Erick, ERICK. And until next time, be well, my friends.